I will tell you that our system is broken. I give to many people. Before 2 months ago, I was a businessman. I give to everybody. When they call, I give. And you know what? When I need something from them 2 years later, 3 years later, I call them. They are there for me. And that's a broken system.
We want a government which represents all of us, not just the 1%.
So what is corruption, you may ask? Well, let me tell you. This entire semester I've been working on my 45-page senior thesis, and I finally know what it is. Corruption is a noun. It's defined as the abuse of entrusted power for private gain. Now, this definition is given by Transparency International, which is a non-profit, non-governmental organization that is dedicated to fighting corruption all across the world. So Transparency International actually breaks down corruption into 3 separate subgroups. And the 3 subgroups are grand corruption, petty corruption, and political corruption. So the first type of corruption that I'm going to talk about is grand corruption. Now, if we're looking at the 3 types of corruption as they would occur in American government, we would see that grand corruption is what would occur in higher up in the politics. So that would be what happens in the White House or what would happen in Congress. The second type of corruption would be petty corruption. And now, again, if we're looking at the American government system, this would be what would occur in the state and local politics. So whatever corruption you think would occur in board of regents, for an example, that would be an example of petty corruption. And the last type of corruption defined by Transparency International would be political corruption. Now, this type of corruption, you would think you would be confused with grand or petty because it's called political corruption, but it would actually be the policies and the laws that are actually implemented by the politicians and how money would be given to these politicians in a corrupt manner. So there's so many different types of corruption, but there's also so many different ways corruption is portrayed in politics. Now, some examples include bribery, but the one that I really want to focus on is the lack of transparency. Now, transparency is whether or not you're easily able to identify what the government is doing and whether or not you can see the actions of the government, where the money is going, how they're spending their money, and that's pretty much what transparency itself is. Okay, so in today's presidential election, we have many different candidates running to be the front runners of their parties. Now, 2 candidates in specific have actually brought up this issue of the lack of transparency, and these candidates include Senator Bernie Sanders from Vermont and Donald Trump.
And that is why I believe that Secretary Clinton should share that speech with all of us.
Now, both of them have highlighted the issue of the lack of transparency, but the main focus that they have been consistently talking about is how money plays a role in politics, how the government is spending money, how politics, as far as campaign finances, how the money is being spent that way, and how the people are actually involved in this process and whether or not the people are aware of how their money is actually being spent. This brings us directly into the court case of Citizens United.
Where Citizens United has eroded our democracy to the point where the political power is now in the hands of the wealthy elite and corporations.
Citizens United is a Supreme Court case that guaranteed the First Amendment right to the freedom of speech, not only to the individual, but also to large corporations. Now, this becomes an issue because the people who vote in the elections, generally speaking, are the average voters, the average citizens. If they can't afford to pay the politicians that they want and essentially buy out their vote, they're not going to get heard. And I'm not saying that all corporations necessarily buy out the politicians that they want, but you have more leniency when you're giving way more money than the average voter.
Politicians have even used science at some points to help aid in their corruption. A big issue that we're seeing today is the issue of climate change. We often see that Republicans deny climate change or see it as not important. For example, Marco Rubio acknowledges that climate change is a real thing but doesn't see it as important. So a reason why people may think that way, especially the Republicans, is because the fossil fuel industries contribute a lot of money to their campaigns. They contributed over $330 million to Republican campaigns since the 90s and $82 million to Democratic campaigns since the 90s. We see that someone like Bernie Sanders is really speaking out against climate change and receives no money from the fossil fuel industry, where we have another candidate like Hillary Clinton that speaks out about it somewhat but not very passionately, and we see that she's getting $7 million from the fossil fuel industry. Big money contributions is something that has also played a big role in politics and has led to corruption, because through big money, we've seen that corporations represent politicians rather than the people. So, for example, when a company donates a large sum of money to a candidate, that's big money, and candidates set up super PACs to earn more money for their campaign. We see two candidates currently in the election that are against big money in politics. That's Donald Trump because he's self-funding his campaign, and Bernie Sanders because he relies on individual donations from contributors just like regular people, and he relies on an average of $27 per person. Delegates and superdelegates are another mathematical issue that we've seen lead to corruption in politics. We have superdelegates who basically are just picking which candidate they support regardless of whether or not it matches up with the people's votes. That's something that we've seen a lot with Bernie versus Hillary, because oftentimes he'll win the popular vote in a state but leave with less delegates because Hillary has the support of those superdelegates. So that's a problem because the numbers aren't really matching up. Another time that we saw a big difference in the electoral vote versus the popular vote was the Bush versus Gore election. Bush got 271 of the electoral vote and Gore got 266, yet Gore had over 500,000 more popular votes than Bush did and still did not win the presidency. Another problem is the winner-take-all idea, because in some states, a candidate could get 40% of the popular vote, but if it's a winner-take-all state, they leave with 0 delegates and basically get nothing because of policies like this one.
With the exception of the presidential election, sometimes even then, politics can be pretty hard for an average citizen to keep up with. Cartoonists like Thomas Nash really brought attention to political corruption in the 1870s. Nash illustrated the corruption of Horace Greeley, a presidential candidate in 1872, and later boss William Tweed, head of the Tammany Hall. Political cartoons need to capture the viewer's attention and convey a message in a very short window of time. These cartoons, especially those of Nash, serve an important role in the checks and balances of American government. Not only is Nash providing important feedback as a U.S. citizen, but he is spreading the understanding of politics to the general population. Nash's political cartoons caught so much attention that Tweed demanded, "Stop them damn pictures. I don't care so much what the papers write about me. My constituents can't read, but damn it, they can see pictures." Many of these political cartoons have been contemporarily spun in a way that fits today's political problems. There are certainly a number of films in existence that highlight political corruption. These films include The Finger of Justice from 1918, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington from 1939, All the King's Men from 1949, All the President's Men from 1966, and City Hall from 1996. There are also works of literature focusing on American political corruption, such as Democracy by Henry Adams, The Gentleman from Indiana by Booth Tarkington, The Jungle by Upton Sinclair, and The Shame of the Cities by Lincoln Steffens. Even more widely known are works such as 1984 and Animal Farm, both from George Orwell. These works, while not set in America, provide dystopian societies, offering political commentary. Music has been a part of political commentary since the birth of this country. There have been songs such as Bob Dylan's "The Times They Are A-Changin',"
Come senators, congressmen, please heed the call. Don't stand in the doorway, don't block up the hall.
and Bob Marley's Redemption Song.
Emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds.
Even Danbury's own Charles Ives produced music speaking to the selfish bossing groups. To this day, music continues to be a prevalent part of society, offering political commentary. Current artists such as Green Day, Pink, and Eminem have music out making comments on the political situations. There are songs from artists like Kenny Chesney's Noise.
It's so loud that no one listens. Sex and money and politicians talk, but there really ain't no conversation.
And Rush's Closer to the Heart.
And the men who hold high places must be the ones who start to mold a new reality closer to the heart.
So what does this all mean? In today's society, we have musicians, writers, movie makers, political cartoonists, all offering commentary on what's going on in politics. Politics is about checks and balances. Yes, there are the people working in government, but there's also the people voting them in and having the say at the lower levels. These artists all have something to say. They want to make a difference, and they're raising their voices in the way they know how. They should be able to break into politics and help make that change. Politicians should listen to them. If we want to end corruption, if we want to make the world a better place, let every person have an equal opportunity to get involved in politics.
Alright, so now that we have addressed the issue of corruption in politics, especially within the American government system, how are we going to fix it? Like, what are we going to do about it?
Well, I think looking at the whole climate change issue, we need to actually have politicians that do their research, learn how dangerous and how big of an issue this is, and actually try to fight it and not be accepting money from industries like fossil fuels. And I don't know, just like actually realize what an impact this is making on the world and not contribute to it.
Oh, that's a good one.
I think we really need to let more of the overall population have a say in politics. I know everyone votes for their presidential candidates and their representatives, but a lot of people feel as though they can't go into politics if they haven't had a political science major, if they don't know the history of the country, that sort of thing. But a lot of people, a lot of artists, well-meaning folks have drive and desires to make things better, and if we listen to them more, they're not going to do it for personal gain. They're going to do it to make the country better.
Yeah, and definitely going off of what you were saying, I agree with the whole making sure that everyone is capable of getting involved. Like, for example, voting, like voting polls and stuff like that. You know, we hear that in America when the primaries are happening, people don't even know if they're in a closed or open primary state. People don't know what candidate is running for what party. People don't know where to even go vote. Or if they do go vote, they show up to their polls and turns out that their polling location has been changed without them being notified. And that's not fair. Like, you know, people say, like, or politicians at least say that they want to represent all of the people, yet why are so many people being excluded from the voting process? That's a problem within corruption itself. So that's another thing.
Yeah, and if politicians really want to represent the people, we need to get rid of things like superdelegates who just get to say, oh, this is who I want to win, and this is like who I'm going to give my vote to. That's going to count for more than anyone else's vote. I just don't think that we should have something like that. I think that we should just be focusing on the popular vote and actually take the people's word into consideration rather than corporations and superdelegates and people that don't know what the people want.
And also going off of that, I feel like the media plays a huge impact in this. You know, it's the media reports whatever they want to report, but you don't know who's buying out what media station. You don't know who is running, like, who's saying what. You don't know if, you know, the editor-in-chief said to their staff writers, okay, you're only required to, like, write about this. And that definitely impacts what the people see. So even if you are informed, you may not even be informed. So that's a huge problem as well.
So it seems like there's a lot of great ideas here to help us end the political corruption. So let's get started. I feel like we should go find a delegate.
All right. Shani Patel 2016. I want a politician who wants to create a transparent system and does anything to allow the voters to see what's actually going on.
I want a politician who will listen to the voices of all people and not just big money donors.
I want a politician with passion and purpose.
I want a politician who is aware of the relevant societal issues and knows how the people feel about them.
I want a politician who is aware of the corruption in our society and is determined to do anything to eradicate it.
I want a politician with drive and determination.
We want a non-corrupt government.